Welcome to the Powderhorn Podcast, part of the Okayest Podcast Network, where host Jared Gomez covers everything that goes bang. From grandpa's lever action to cutting-edge tactical gear, this is your go-to for sharpening skills, building confidence, and geeking out on the rich past and bold future of shooting sports.
I've had it.
Pop out of the room, internet takes a crap, and you come back in, and you're suddenly mirrored. Is that the correct? Is that the nomenclature that we're going for?
I couldn't begin to tell you.
Yeah.
My vocabulary is that of a 5-year-old.
All right. Well, now it says the recording started over for me, at least. I don't know what it says for you.
99% uploaded.
Yeah. All right. Well, episode 4 for the Powderhorn Podcast. Here we are. I'm Jared Gomez. I am your host, always joined by my good friend, Tim Watts. Tim, tell people what's going on in your life.
Man, it's another great day in the gun industry. I am hanging out. I'm home, so that's always pretty neat.
How much laundry do you have piled up? I like how you
there's
look.
A duffel bag there's a duffel bag and a suitcase full. So before next week, gotta do some laundry.
Nice. Well, tonight we were supposed to be joined by a guest. Unfortunately, their kids brought home a nasty bug from school, and they weren't able to make it. So, Tim, we're on our own again tonight. At some point, we hope to get some guests on this show and spread the love, have a few laughs, and exchange banter with some other folks in the industry. So maybe next week we'll be able to finally dial in some of our guests and get those people on here to start letting you all know their journey in the firearms industry, because here at the Okayest Shooter and the Powderhorn Podcast, we're genuinely trying to figure out what got people into guns. I know what got Tim into guns. Maybe I don't. Maybe Tim's got a secret. But I know what got me into firearms, and that's the goal of it here. It doesn't matter if you're into the latest and greatest things, or maybe you just like collecting a certain type of firearm because you have your own reasons, and that's cool to us. And, tonight we're going to talk about what, Tim?
We're going to talk about the right and wrong ways. Not that there is necessarily a wrong way, but the different ways you can obtain those boomsticks.
Yeah, and I think it's a cool topic. I think people out in the real world, whether it's their local gun shop, whether they have like what I'll call a chain gun store like Range USA or, some of the other ones like that. Or maybe they spend all their time on the internet going through Gunbroker or guns.com or even Arms List. There's a lot of different ways that we spend trying to find that perfect gun. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I'll touch on it. Like I said, I think internet's a great thing, and it's also a scary place all at the same time. I'll be the first to admit I've made plenty of mistakes going on that route for buying things. But I think it's good to understand that there are different levels of when and why you should purchase, boomsticks, the good old guns, the GATs.
The old smoke poles, smoke wagons.
Yeah. The big iron.
So before we get into guns, buying things online, I think in today's age, we buy everything online. Thankfully, I'm in my mid-40s, so I remember a time where you couldn't do that, where you just had to find it locally or, your local store would order it in. So internet purchases is a general scheme. What's the one that just bit you?
I mean, I think I've been pretty safe. I will go to the gun side of things, like right off the bat. I had it in my head. I wanted the CZ Scorpion so bad, and I saw my PSA, Palmetto State Armory, for a smoking deal, and I had messed with them before. This was a newer version, and I bought that thing, and I got it in my hands, and I was just so disappointed because I just hadn't touched that version yet. It might have been probably sold within a week.
Yeah.
But hey, that happens.
So not gun related. You bought something, that 2 a.m. you're on Amazon, and you bought something and it showed up, or, you were just like, gosh dang it.
I'm really trying to think of something that I just don't even know, Jared. There's probably a lot of things.
I mean, I have like one that really stands out. Furniture. Anytime I buy furniture online and it shows up, I'm that guy that has to call the 1-800 number. It's like, hey, I got this and I'm missing 3 screws. I'm missing one whole shelf component, or I strip something out. I don't go to IKEA. I get it from Amazon or, one of those other websites. So furniture is one for me. Anytime I have to order furniture online, I immediately know this transaction is going to go off the rails. And the other one is it always seems to be like batteries that I order online that I just get hosed. So I've ordered like rechargeable AA batteries, and I get them in, and they have like the best reviews, and I go and throw them in my chargers, and they're just dead already. And I'm like, So I have like the one set that was left out on a shipping dock in like 140-degree weather. So furniture and batteries, ordering those online, and even like for computers, like, I'm a MacBook guy, and, Apple laptops and their batteries are this great, terrible thing. So ordering a new battery for a Mac laptop is always, it's either going to go really, really well, or you're going to get like a box full of tissue paper and get ripped off. So those are my two outside the gun world: batteries and furniture. I hate ordering them online.
I think what it really boils down to for me is if I want something, I kind of want it that day. And I have a really bad habit of going and paying more for it just so I can go buy it out of a store.
And I get that. I mean, if you can put hands on it, definitely. But then there's other times where I've gone into stores and you go in there thinking they're going to have one, they don't. And then you're like, crap, I should have just not put my pants on, sat at home with my boxer shorts and my laptop, shopping on the old, Amazons and the eBays, and got what I wanted shipped to my house.
What about Temu? Could you imagine if you could buy guns off Temu?
I don't, you know what, I posted, did you see the thing I posted on Instagram last week where it was flashlight reflectors? Temu had an ad for 6 pieces of flashlight reflectors. Those were not flashlight reflectors, and I would never order those off Temu. So I think Temu is secretly run by the ATF, or they maybe have an agent or two there, because they're always trying to sell us the solvent traps. And, yes. I saw the flashlight, orange anodized flashlight reflectors. If you're listening, don't go to Temu and buy these. It's a trap. It is a trap in the biggest sense of the words, but I don't think I've ever bought anything off Temu. Well, no, I have. Actually, I have. If you need shoot and see targets, they come on a roll, and they're like 3 inches by 3 inches, and the roll has like 500 of them on there, and it's like $9. It's really, and
the roll's still sitting on your workbench over there unopened because you forget it every time you take it to the range.
No, but I have 3 rolls. One of them is always left at home. The other 2 are, scattered about. I keep one at deer camp, and then there's probably one rolling around in the bed of my truck. But yeah, on Temu, shoot and see targets. My wife ordered them for me. I don't have an account. I don't get how that works. There's always like pop-ups and stuff that you have to go through to get there, and I don't have the attention span for that.
Fair enough. Well,
yeah, I mean, internet shopping, it's a terrible place. And I think when you add in the equation of firearms, it only gets more tricky.
I would agree with that. I think, let's start with let's get off the internet subject. It's a little sad. I think I didn't start off on a good note there. I think there are a lot of good things about the internet purchases that, maybe I was a little overzealous and jumped the gun,
you can shop anywhere on the internet, but nothing beats going to the local gun shop.
That's exactly where I was going.
I think that it's changed, I guess. Maybe I don't think you have it as good as I did, but I remember when we talked about our first shots episode, your local gun shop where you went in and they just had like those shotguns piled against the wall were cool. So tell everyone about like your favorite local gun shop and what it was like going in.
Well, I mean, the local gun shop I really started off with and was also the one I happened to end up working for is Eastside
Always
Traders.
A terrible thing.
It's one of those things, right? So Eastside Traders in Ontario, New York, shout those guys out. It was a great place to go shop pre-COVID, man. It was, and we talked about it a little bit. It was amazing. You had all these guns, the shelves were full. There were good deals to be had. You used to be able to find, your little single shot New England Arms shotguns. They were sitting down there on that rack for $100 a piece. And that was a time to be alive. And I think now as times have progressed and, things have changed, it's not always that way. It kind of shifted. Used guns got pricier in some ways, and those harder to find guns are, few and far between on the shelf. So that's where I'd say the internet has turned to be a good thing, is you can go to places like Arms List or Gun Broker or Guns.com, or, hit up guys like Collectors Firearms, who we talk about a lot, and you can find them.
There's those bigger gun shops, and that's kind of what I miss, because when I first started buying guns, gun shops were like in the basements of people's houses, like home FFLs. We had Shooting Stuff in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is on Hannah Street, which was kind of in a less than desirable neighborhood, is I guess the best way I can put it. But we had bigger gun shops like Freedom Firearms that had an indoor range, which in the late 90s was kind of rare. An indoor range was still kind of new. And then other gun shops that were around the town, Cheaps was like half military surplus store and then half guns. So think about Rambo, like when he breaks into the gun shop in the middle of the night and pushes the button under the counter and, all the cool stuff gets exposed. I think those gun shops were super cool. And, the gun racks in them were homemade. They were made out of plywood or oak, It wasn't like when you go into a gun shop now and there's like fancy grid wall and everything looks spaced out perfectly. There was that gun shop like yours that there was like a gun rack on the ground that, you know, it had 22 slots for guns, but there was probably how many in there? 30,
Yeah, 50
35.
or 60 sometimes.
And so I hate it for some people now because they don't get to go into gun shops like that. And there are still some of those that exist, but you gotta find them. You know, local gun shops they were cool places. You know, you could go there on Saturday morning and have a cup of coffee. You know, you could always ask the owner, hey, is this your best price? Oh, and he's not going to give you any better of a deal, but you know, you could kind of mess with him in that sense. You know, even as you traveling, do you think those gun shops still exist? And maybe there's one in modern, you know, in your modern memory or your recent memory that jumps out at you like that?
In my travels, Cedar Falls Tactical or Cedar Falls Outdoors, they're on the east side of Missouri. Really great people. Ben, the owner, is a super cool dude. If you're ever in that area, stop in. I believe it's Bonne Terre, Missouri. Don't hold me to that. Probably said it wrong. But I remember going in there for the first time, and they did have not old racks, but they had glass display cases, and they had probably 20 of the old school or older Marlins. They had a case with a bunch of older shotguns, and they had a decent selection of that. And I think that's just something they kind of seek out. I feel like they go out of their way to get that, which is awesome. I know that stuff, it rolls in on occasion, but that selection was definitely there intentionally. That's one that sticks with me, though.
I'm thankful where I live at in the upstate of South Carolina, and you're familiar with the shop. 12 Mile Defense is this like little hole-in-the-wall shop. One, the owner is a hustler. I literally leave like cash in my Jeep. I don't go in there with cash because he will swindle me out of it. I mean, he's a good dude, but he's a business guy. You're never going to come out on top, you know, battling with Dave at 12 Mile Defense. But he's like a gun shop it's a small local shop, and there's cool stuff in there constantly. You can go in there and there'll be like a Colt Mustang that's got some pretty cool history. Right now he's got a really cool selection of Smiths, like, you know, K-frames and things like that. And I'm like, you know, what are they doing here? It's like a small shop. So that shop is super cool. I think, you know, outside of this area, the coolest one I visited, well, there's two, and they were both when I was going into Georgia. There's, it's a gun shop called Guns and Drugs, and it's half gun shop, half drugstore. And when I say drugstore, I mean a legitimate drugstore. They sell like, you know, the little stools you put in your shower. You can get your prescriptions filled there, and the other side is like a small gun shop. And they've got billboards, you know, all over the area for that. So that one is pretty neat. I don't know how the ATF deals with that gun shop on a monthly basis. Have you ever heard of that one?
I have. Someone I used to work with had sent me a picture of that place. I think he went there in his travels. So, you know, you see something like that, you're like, oh, this is sweet. I mean, you see some of the gas stations that still have gun stores in them. I think there's one floating around here somewhere. I remember going way back when. But it's stuff like that.
There's an Ace Hardware one that's near Ellijay, Georgia. It's like Blue Ridge Ace Hardware. That one I think is super cool. They had some like old Wyndham weaponry arm pistols. So, you know, the old Bushmaster arm pistol, which predates, you know, a lot of the old Bushmaster lore. But there's those cool gun shops like the old Mountney hardware stores that have cool stuff in there.
So I guess kind of what's the downside?
I think the downside to those shops is sometimes you go in there and they're a little proud of some of the stuff they have in there. You know, you think the price is a little higher, so you might be able to haggle with them, but you know, sometimes they're just really proud of the things they have. So that's my biggest downside to them. Is you go in there and you see something cool, but the price is already like, you know, a really high markup. So you're just like, I don't know if I'm going to get away with this.
You know, I'm going to flip things and I'm going to go to the optimistic view. I think being, you know, maybe newer to the industry or newer to guns, there is a lot of good and bad knowledge that could be had out of a gun store. But a lot of those guys, when you go in and you talk to someone working a gun counter, not all of them know their stuff, but most of the time you can ask some friends, hey, what's a good shop to go to get some advice? And whether you're buying your, you know, first handgun, first rifle, hey, I want to go hunt deer. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. A lot of those guys can give you good info, whereas maybe going on a website, you're not going to really get that tidbit of information, whether it's right or wrong.
100%, and especially like if you consult YouTube before you buy a gun, you have to kind of navigate that tricky side of that, whether or not, you know, the reviewer, you know, was paid to do the review and they're just telling you it's great because of that, or you look at what people are into. And I think we're going to touch on that in future episodes, like the types of shooters that are out there, whether you're a Navy SEAL and you think a handgun is only for, fighting in a war, or a police officer, or you're the guy that just likes going to the range and punching holes in paper. There's different perspectives, and I think you have to kind of know how to filter those out. Local gun shops are great for that. I've heard a lot of great advice in local gun shops. And then I've also been at the long end of, like the far end of the counter, hearing them talk to people, and you're just, you're doing your 44-73, and they're like, well, this is the gun you would use, and you only have to rack it. And then I like scribble, like the pen drags, and it's like, no, oh. So with anything, there's always good points and bad points. And I think the local gun shops, though, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, kind of to give an example of this, when I was working the counter, you'd have a lot of people coming in to buy handguns in New York, and most of the time it's their first purchase. So the thing I would always tell customers is like, hey, think of buying that handgun as like buying a new pair of boots or sneakers. They're like, well, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. No, like, hear me out. If that gun doesn't feel comfortable to you, and you don't feel comfortable, keeping it in your hand or maybe carrying it even, if that gun isn't comfortable to you, it's going to be like that pair of shoes you buy. You're not going to want to wear it. Same thing with the gun. If you're not comfortable with it, you're not going to practice with it. You're not going to want to take it out. And honestly, what good is it going to do you at that point?
That's a great way of putting it. And that used to be, when I worked behind the gun counter, that was always it. When people would be like, hey, I'm here to buy my first gun. What do you suggest? And I'd be like, doesn't matter what I suggest. There's so many great modern guns that, performance and reliability, that's always going to come up. But first and foremost, put hands on as many guns in the cases as you can, because there will be that one that you pick up and you're like, this feels good. Like, I like this. It feels good in my hand. Or it looks good and feels good, because, aesthetically you want it to be there. There's always a point where you try and like direct someone to a gun that better aligned. Hey, I want a great self-defense gun, but 22 revolver felt really, really good. And you're like, well, it's better than nothing, but maybe there's something better. So we'll try and find something similar. But the boots analogy I like. And I think if I ever found myself behind a gun counter, I would use that. I'd be like, you know what? Let's look for something that.
It's not perfect, but I don't think anything really is in this world. I guess the flip side is I've heard it, and I will say this. I love my Smith & Wesson Airweight revolver. I carry it probably more than any other gun. Nice pocket carry. However, I've been working at an event maybe, or I never did this personally, but I've heard people go to this nice 80-year-old frail lady that doesn't have the wrist strength to rack a slide, and go, you should just buy this 38 Special revolver. And I just sit there and go, that's absolutely horrible. She'll probably break her wrist. So I've heard that too.
There's always like, a level of comfort and a level of, I'll even say, training that you need to have to operate a firearm. But revolvers are generally, pretty easy to shoot if you have to shoot them under stress. If you're just like, bad guy, shoot, yes. But if you're going to take a small airweight to the range and expect to do a really fast bill drill, probably not going to happen. And I always say a gun is better than no gun, and I'll continue to say that. So gun shop advice, it can vary, but for the most part, looking through like your local gun shop, and then even using the internet and suggestions of friends. If you have friends that own multiple firearms, buy them dinner. Take them out to a nice lunch, and maybe they'll take you to a range and let you shoot some of the cool guns that they have, and you might find one. The biggest thing is just trying them out, finding what you like, finding what works with your body mechanics, and then going from there. So advice can be good or bad, and man, it's a whole nother topic for another show, honestly.
I'd agree with that. I guess to kind of shift the gears, we go from, all right, we're at the local gun shop, and you know what, the prices might not be the best. So you know what? I'm going to hop on the internet, the good old interwebs, and I'm going to just find that smoking deal on something I think I like. I brought it up. I bought a CZ Scorpion. I didn't get hands on it first. That was a regretted purchase. I mean, Jared, have you ever had anything like that where you bought a gun online just thinking this is it, and then you got it and you're like, ugh?
Man, I've even, I've done it a few times, and I've dealt with it working in gun shops where people would order one in and they'd come pick it up, do their 4473, pay their transfer fee, and then they get to play with their gun and be like, well, this sucks. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe you could have paid a little more and checked out one in the shop, and I get it if they don't have it on the shelf, you have to deal with that. I think one gun that really did that for me was the Ruger American 22, the bolt action rifle. I'm a huge CZ fan. I have a CZ 452 that I've owned for over 10 years now. And it's kind of showing its age. I've shot it a lot, so I was like, man, I'll get a Ruger American 1022. Lo and behold, the local shop didn't have one, so ordered one online. Came into the shop, and the action was super rough. The trigger on it is the most mediocre trigger I've ever pulled, especially comparing it next to my CZ. So that was a gun that I brought home, and I looked at my son and I'm like, hey, I bought you a new 22 bolt action rifle.
My
Like,
gosh.
here's something for you to squirrel hunt with. And he's like, but it's brand new. And I'm like, I know, I'm going to keep my old one because it's accurate as can be. So there are those things that sometimes having it on a gun shop shelf is nice because you can pick it up, you can feel that action, you know, and not it. I'm going to say this again. Guns are like boots too. You can have 3 of them on the shelf, and not every single one is going to be as smooth as the other one. You know,
I was about to say that. I mean,
you know,
we're talking about manufacturing, and
yeah,
we both come from a background where we see the day-to-day. So it is important to understand that just because you had a bad experience with a specific manufacturer or a specific gun from a manufacturer, keep in mind, sometimes you just get that oddball out. It happens, and that is why it's a better chance that if you go to that shop and you get hands-on, you're going to know, and you're not going to make possibly a regretful purchase, as we would say.
One of my favorite movie scenes going back is, I think it's The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. There's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly trio, but it's when Tuco stumbles out of the desert. He walks into the gun shop and he's like, pistols, revolvers, and shopkeeper gets out like 5 or 6 different revolvers, but he picks them up and he starts playing with all the pieces, and he's spinning the cylinder, clicking the hammer until he finds one that's just like, and then he goes outside and does the shooting. And I kind of do the same thing with guns myself. There may be 2 of them in the case. You pick one up and maybe one speaks to you just a little louder. You know, the trigger, and some of it's probably perception or, you know, the placebo effect, but you might pick one up and you feel that trigger pull, you hear the reset, and you're like, this is it. This is that one that feels good. So you buy it. So there is that, I think, being able to get hands on them, you do get that little bit of a, you know, emotional and physical connection to it in the store where you're like, ooh, like this one, you know, this one feels really good. So there's that too.
I totally agree. And then something to keep in mind, like just because the gun is there and they'll let you hold it, certain revolvers, really high-end revolvers, for example, don't open it, spin the cylinder, and then slam it shut.
Don't do that.
There's no need for that. Bad.
I
There's
do it
some
though.
guns-
I mean, when I bought my Model 10, I came home and immediately was like,
But it was yours at that point.
exactly.
Just
it wasn't
remember,
mine. And
when it's still on that shelf, it's not yours yet.
I won't do it to it every day. I know it's bad for the guns, but you can't help it. It just gets you.
It's funny. You had posted a picture of a Nighthawk gun today, and I think we've talked about them a couple times now. I love their stuff. They make really good products. I believe it's Korth, right? Korth revolvers is the...
Yeah.
So I was at a gun shop in Iowa, and I was in there selling guns, actually. And I was waiting for the owner to clean up some stuff, and one of the counter guys is talking with a customer, and he says, hey, can I see that Korth revolver down there? And probably saying that wrong, but it was a younger person. Picks it up, opens it, spins it, slams it shut, just like I talked about. And the guy looked at him and said, that'll be $8,000 or something crazy. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, you just marked the entire cylinder. You're taking that home. And he bought it. He stomached it, man. He bought it. Maxed out his Amex.
Yeah, I don't know. So there's that gun shop etiquette. Yeah, if you respect the guns, if they say you can dry fire them, you know, dry fire them. I think being trade show guys, you get a little spoiled on it because guns you see at trade shows, you can it's a Wild West. We can do whatever we want with them. But when you go into a gun shop, you have to understand those guns are for sale. So if you don't buy it and you do reckless things with it or don't treat it the way it should be, you're ruining it for the next guy. Buying guns, we've talked about the experiences on both, but when you're going into your local gun shop, Tim, what are some things that you look out for? So say you have a gun in mind, what are you looking for in the gun shop? Whether it's a new gun or a used gun, what's going to sway you and what's going to convince you? And how are you going to haggle or make sure you're not getting taken advantage of?
So Tim, a few years ago, loved to look for obviously old stuff that was a good price. That was definitely touched on in the first episode. Still continuously, I will go into stores and just kind of look around and be like, can I find a Marlin 3030 at a good price? Can I find one of those old Sears and Roebuck shotguns? I always look for the old stuff because guess what? They're not making more of it. Got to keep an eye out. Should I spend the money on it? Probably not, but am I going to? Sure, why not? The flip side, and this makes me sound like a bad person, I will I will find guns that are clearly undervalued. And I think you might have done this on the internet side, but I've seen it more often than not where sometimes they buy this gun and I don't think they realize what they have. And, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And if I see that, I will definitely take advantage of it. Sometimes I'll tell them if I don't plan on buying it, I'll be like, hey, just so you know, you're $400 way too low on this gun. But if I see it and I'm like, I've been looking for one of these, I will snag it up.
I'm a value hunter too, so I kind of do the same thing pretty religiously. And local gun shops is a little bit harder to do. Every now and again, you'll walk in. Years ago, it was a gun shop in New Haven, Indiana. Maybe it was Shooting Stuff. The guy smoked in the gun shop, so it always smelled awful when you went in there. I mean, that's just, But he had a Mauser K duffel cut, so it wasn't imported, but all matching for $250. And it was part of an estate sale. And I bought that gun on that. It's like, did I really want that gun at that time? No. But historically, it was a pristine example of a 98 Mauser, and I still have it to this day. I've been offered quite a bit of money for it, but it was one of those guns where you're like, you messed up. And that doesn't happen as much in local gun shops as it does for me on the internet. And I'm running a pretty high wave on that, and we'll get into the internet side of that. But I think for me, when I walk into a local gun shop, you always look at the used guns first and see, what they bought, because there are a lot of people that buy guns and then they take it home and it doesn't like them. I think the SIG P365 is one I see a lot of used versions of in gun shops.
Yeah, I see a lot of that as well.
They buy them, and it's a really cool gun. I think it's probably the most popular handgun in America, but I think people buy it and it's a little bit too small, or, I don't know what it is about it, but when I go into gun shops, I usually see a couple of those used available. So if you're going to buy a P365, shop around. You'll find a deal on a used one, I think pretty easily. So that's kind of what I do. I look at the used guns first, and I'm like, what did people buy and maybe trade in? And, I know a used gun, I can kind of haggle with the gun shop owner a little bit and be like, I know what you gave this person for that. I know what you got on the sticker. Let's meet somewhere in the middle. And especially if I see multiple ones in the gun shop. Rimfire rifles, your used shotguns, Tim. If I see 4 or 5 of them in a corner, I'm like, I can probably get one of those for a little bit of a deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna, and this is, I guess, more of an episode about giving advice to those people out there that aren't so sure what to do. I'm gonna give a little trade secret. People are gonna hate me for this, but I think the general public will appreciate this.
Stay tuned, people. Okayest pro tip coming from Tim in 3, 2, 1.
I want you to keep in mind, while most gun shops do really well for themselves, new guns, the actual margins, as we would say, are not what you think they are. They don't make a ton of money off the new firearms. Just keep in mind, if you go in and you're like, hey, I want that new, we'll use a 365, for example. I want that new 365 XL. They don't have a lot of room, and they stock it because it's popular, and that kind of drives the price. So keep that in mind. If you're going into a local shop and you're trying to haggle with them on a new gun and they just won't move, there's a reason for that. Or they're already making what they can make, and they got to stay open. The flip side, used guns, when you are most of the time, unless it's something kind of out of place, but just a standard run-of-the-mill used gun, when you sell one, you're going to take a hit 9 times out of 10. If you, like that CZ Scorpion I talked about.
We've all seen Pawn Stars. We know how this game works.
But in all seriousness, there's almost always a little bit more room on those used guns, so keep that in mind. Not always the case, but usually if you see a used handgun that you want sitting on the shelf, I bet you they got a little bit of room to wiggle on it. Not always the case, but that would be my suggestion. If you're going to haggle on the used gun with the dust on it.
Yeah, used guns. If you see multiples, and I'll interject this one because, I think running a gun shop nowadays is very tight. Margins aren't what people think you're going to do. If you're going to get into anything to make a ton of money, guns is probably not it. You can do well. I think there are some gun shops that do really well, but if you're going to go into your local gun shop and you're going to beat them up on pricing or try and haggle with them, build a good rapport with that gun shop. Go in there. If they've treated you right, if they've had what you've wanted, pay full price. Take that hit a few times, because if you do that, you may go in there that one time where they have something and you can be like, hey, Tim, remember, and don't throw it in their face, but be like, hey, Tim, this one I'm really interested in. I've never asked for a deal before. I've been in here every Saturday. I've bought coffee. I've bought magazines and ammo. Could you help me out on this one a little bit? And if you have that good relationship with your local shop where you go to them first, and you may pay a little bit more every now and again, but that one time where you need that deal, it may pay off for you. So build a good relationship with your local gun shop, and
Yeah,
and it may
I
pay off.
agree with that. And I will add on to that a little more. Let's appreciate the fact that, yeah, they're running a business. They got to keep the lights on. Keep in mind, just because you can get a better deal. And actually, my dad is like a great example of this. I think he kind of brings it out in me. But sometimes, yeah, you might pay $50 more shopping local, but you have that accessibility to that gun shop down the road to go get hands on some of these things before you might turn around and buy it online. So share the love, you know?
Yeah, my local gun shop, I don't buy everything from there. I buy quite a few things from there. And, like we'll talk about the online sales here in a little bit, but I'll walk in there every now and again and he'll just have exactly what I want. And I just buy it. Like, I don't ask for a deal. I'm just like, you know what? You did me a solid. You put up with my bad jokes. And, when I go in there, I touch everything. I'm just like, ooh. So building that relationship with your local gun shop is a great way to save a little bit of money in the long term. You may not get the best deal on every gun, but you're honestly going to get taken care of better, I think, than just buying a gun online and having it sent to your local FFL. Then you go on there, you pay your $20 and you leave immediately. So go to your local gun shop, hang out, be a part of the business, be a part of the community in your area. And, if you have terrible gun shops in your area, find a good one. I mean, trust me, I've got several terrible gun shops here. And
There's always the good,
area.
the bad, and the ugly.
We've talked a little bit about, getting into gun shops, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, but let's address the elephant in the room, and that is the internet. They can't see you do that, Tim. We're still
but
audio only, but one day maybe. Tim's just waving his hands in the air like,
Those jazz hands, kind of.
Yeah. So the internet, I come from the age, and we talked about this in episode 1, where my first gun I bought from a little local classified newspaper called the Peddler's Post. And the internet, I think, has reshaped how we buy guns. A lot of online retailers that came out of nowhere have blown up. Palmetto State Armory is one of them, and there's just a plethora of them nowadays. So buying guns on the internet, Tim, what would you tell people in one sentence what it's like?
It's a curse and a blessing.
Well put. I think I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah, and I'll say it's a curse and a blessing for many reasons. Palmetto State Armory, really good example. Man, they got some smoking deals on there. Daily deals. Look at your own risk. That's all I'm going to say. I bought plenty of things from there. Another major online guy, Battlehawk Armory. Here's where it gets fun, right? You can find a ton of good deals. Sometimes you know what you want, and hey, oh my gosh, I found it for $200 less online. That's awesome. That's not a bad time to make a purchase like that. The flip side is you get signed up for those email blasts, and like, oh my gosh, I can buy a case of 9mm for $200, and then you buy 6 cases of 9mm, and now there's 6 cases of 9mm. Yeah. So bear in mind, it's a double-edged sword of you can find some good deals, but you can also find a lot of good reasons to spend money.
Years ago, when the internet, e-commerce thing kind of took off for guns, it was cool. I remember when Palmetto State Armory was a small one-room shop, like in Columbia, South Carolina. They weren't what you guys think they are now. They had ammo that they bought by the pallet and they resold it, and gunpowder. They were really big into gunpowder early on. So, you would buy those things online, and it was, easier to do. Most local gun shops, you couldn't go in and buy 1,000 rounds of 9mm. It just, some gun shops did, but you couldn't do it. So it changed the landscape for us, at that time, especially. Used guns we bought, from local classified newspapers, local gun shows, and we got to talk about gun shows too. One thing we didn't really touch on early on, but when the internet kind of advented, it was like ammunition and accessories first. Guns were, I don't know, the waters were still kind of muddy, pre-2000, into what we are now. But now, FFL locators, online financing for guns, the internet is a pretty powerful tool, but it comes with some pitfalls, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up the muddy zone. I'm young compared to you. Sorry, that was a little rude.
I'm a dinosaur over here. If only we would been able to buy our muskets off the internet when the British were invading.
But I think it's something to look at, and it's a little off topic, but I'm pretty sure there was. I'll make the assumption that there was some uncertainty. Can you sell guns on the internet? How are we gonna do this? Are we gonna pull out our typewriter and sorry? But anyways, I think the uncertainty behind it kind of did hold things up for a bit, but I'm safe to say that once it was figured out, it was just this waterfall of you have so many people pop up and they were doing it, which is a good thing for the most part.
But you missed like the golden age of it, because there were times where, and I'll use AIM Surplus as an example, where we could buy a crate of Mosin Nagants for, if you bought the whole crate, and I think it was like 24 guns to a crate, maybe a different number now, but we would get these rifles for like $39 a pop. And a FedEx truck would literally show up to your local gun shop with a 4 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot wooden crate of World War II bolt action rifles. And you would go in and do a 4473 and take home your coffee table of guns. So that's something you never got to take part of. God bless us and our typewriters.
Amen. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. Now, what I will say, we talk about used guns a lot, and I'm going to bring them up again. Collector's firearms. I was just texting a coworker today, and he said, hey, can you keep an eye out for one of these? And I'm like, I can, but I've never seen one out in the wild. Actually, you know what? I'm going to look and see exactly what that was. Jeff, let me give you a shout out here. The specific gun discussion, of course, it's in text messages, not the actual.
Well, I mean, like guns on the internet, it's like eBay and Amazon. You can find anything if you know how to search for it and look for it. And, while you're thinking about that, I'll say this. You can buy guns on the internet. And if you're not, if you don't know about it, the way it works is you find a gun on the internet from a dealer. And generally, they always have to be licensed in the state they're in. So if I'm in South Carolina, Tim, you're in Tennessee. Say you're an online retailer in Tennessee, and I find a gun that you want. The misconception, and I think a lot of like the news and media throws around, is we can just buy guns on the internet like you would buy a pair of socks from Amazon, and that's not the case. The gun still has to go from that dealer and come to a local dealer in your area. So it would go to my local gun shop. I go in there and I still do the required ATF paperwork regardless. We just don't ship guns to your houses. You just can't buy, things like that. So when you're buying guns online, it's just like buying it from your local gun shop. Just whenever you buy it from your online retailer, say it's Palmetto State Armory, AIM Surplus, Classic Firearms, they still ship it to your local gun shop where you have to go in and do that required paperwork. So if you weren't in the know, that's how it works. There is no internet loophole. You still have to do the regular paperwork as if you were buying it from, a gun shop in your hometown.
So this is going to be the segment called We're Exposing Chat. That's a thing. But this is the exact text message I got. It said, I want all the 70s and 80s spy guns. Tasteful. In your travels, if you ever find a SIG P239, let me know. I love those guns. I simply responded, I'll keep an eye open. Why not? Said thank you. And my exact response was, I bet Collectors has one. So it is really cool to see someone like that, like Collectors, harping on them. They're great people. But even on the used or the old stuff, you do have those resources where you can't find it local. You hop on someone like Collectors and you're like, look at that. They got the gun I want and they're trustworthy to buy it from. So that's awesome. I think that's a great side of the internet gun purchase.
There's, websites that are like that. So I think Collectors, if you're in the market for collectible firearms, there's that. National Armory is kind of getting into that game. Guns.com is still, I don't know, kind of off. They use a dealer network so dealers can upload their guns to their website. So if you're buying from Guns.com, you're not actually always buying directly from Guns.com. They have dealers from wherever can upload guns to their store and buy them. So there are avenues that you kind of have to be a little bit more careful of. But if you're buying guns online, make sure that you're just at one of the reputable websites. Do your due diligence before giving people your credit card information online. As always, I think there's a good, healthy amount of places you can go to buy a gun. When you're buying things from Collectors and things like that, go through the description, read it, make sure that it's exactly what you want. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask for additional photos. And if they're willing to give you that, you're probably in the right spot.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you brought this up, but reviews, I've seen it go both directions. It's just like going up to the counter and saying, hey, what should I buy for my first concealed carry? What should I buy for my first deer rifle? You can get good and bad information anywhere. I think the internet is a perfect example of that. That's what Abraham Lincoln told me on, Reddit one day. But what I will say is, you go to a product listing on a website for anything, but we'll stick to guns. Say you hop on PSA and you see this awesome shotgun you want to buy, and you're looking through the reviews and there's a bunch of good reviews. And sometimes there's just that 1 star and you start reading it and you kind of start reading it. You're like, I don't know, this is kind of scary, but maybe it's 1 out of 1,000. Just bear in mind when it comes to a review on a specific product or even a review on a YouTube channel or something somebody posted on the internet anywhere, it doesn't always mean that's the way it is, if that makes sense.
I think you always have to take into account how people treat firearms, because I've bought guns that generally have had pretty bad reviews or, had a surplus of them, as I guess I'll call it. But there's so many variables you have to take into effect, like what ammo they used, what temperament the person was in, were they already pissed off because, whatever reason. So I always look at reviews like that way too. I'll take my chances on some things, and I've had really good results, and other times, I was like, well, it's got mediocre reviews and it was terrible. I have an M1 carbine from years ago that was that exact case. But also think about that with the retailer as well. Oftentimes, negative reviews are more loud than positive reviews. We're more likely to leave bad reviews for something than we are positive. So, if you have 100 good reviews and 1 negative, there's probably way more positive reviews, that people never decided to post. So I keep that in my back pocket when I order things online and I go through reviews. I always make sure I look at the most recent too. If someone left a negative review 10 years ago, is that as relevant as, the 7 years of positive reviews? So that's the way I've always approached that one.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I guess that would probably be a benefit. If you ask your neighbor, hey man, how's that local gun shop? I've never been there. And they say, oh, they're great to deal with, great guys. That's a really good indicator. But just because there's a good or bad review on something on the internet, you don't get to really talk to that person. You don't really know what the situation is. I see it a lot. And I think you make a great point, but if I buy something on the internet, I take it home, I'm happy with it, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah,
but if for whatever reason there is that issue, I'm probably going to say something. So I think you make a great point.
Yeah. No, and likewise, you're going to have a buddy that, went into his local gun shop and tried to talk him down off of a new gun to 50% off. And the gun store owner was like, and that guy went home and was like, well, I'm never going to deal with him again. He told me to pound sand because he wouldn't give me a free magazine, 10 boxes of ammo, and waived the 3% credit card fee. So there's always that. I always tell people, like, take reviews, put them in your pocket, be cognizant of them, go into your own experience with an open mind. If you get burned, don't ever spend money with that person again, or leave if you get a bad feeling. But it may be that gun shop owner had a bad day. That gun was made on a Tuesday. I'm a pretty open-minded person about it. But buying guns online, that's always a hitch point, because you don't get to see it until it goes to your local gun shop. And you have to kind of take with that. But man, I've had a pretty good run of luck online recently.
Yeah, let's hear about your good sides of the online purchases.
Yeah, so recent purchases, we're gun guys. Okay, a shooter, Powderhorn Podcast. That's what we're here for. We're still gun guys, and we go out and we buy guns. And then I've had a pretty good run of luck as of late, and pretty excited about a few of these. So I've been on GunBroker pretty heavily recently, because there's some guns I want that are, I'd say, collectible, but maybe not so mainstream collectible. And so finding these guns online is hard. And even going to your local gun shop to find these guns can be time consuming, because I'm looking for very niche guns in our hearts. When we did episode 1 and we talked about my single shot 12 gauge shotgun that was rifled slug gun, it was an NEF Partner Tracker 2 shotgun that I sold years ago. So I don't know, Tim, I obsessed about it for about 2 weeks, and I'm on GunBroker looking for one, and I'm on Arms List, and I'm going through my local gun shops, calling them around, and I couldn't find one. So finally I found one on GunBroker, and I'm pretty stoked on it. It's not in 12 gauge because I'm older. I decided to get it in 20 gauge, but I did find a New England Firearms Tracker 2 in 20 gauge that has a much nicer butt pad than, the original one that I owned years ago, and I got it for a pretty good deal. The downside was, if I put in New England Firearms 20 gauge slug gun, I didn't get any results. Or if I put in single shot deer rifle, I didn't get results. So it took me a while to kind of dial in what I was searching for to find the gun I want. And that also happened with another gun that I picked up today, which I'm super stoked on, which was a Beretta M9. I always wanted a close to military issue Beretta 9 as I could get. And so I would just search on GunBroker Beretta M9 Global War on Terror. And I really played with what I was searching for until I kind of dialed it in. And like even this Tracker, single shot shotgun, I had to go through like 4 or 5 pages of single shot shotguns till I found this listing, put it on my watch list, and then I waited for the bidding to end. Some of the auctions on Gunbroker, and I'll call out Gunbroker, why are we having 21-day auctions? It's ridiculous. We don't need that.
That's the worst part about it, is half the time it's just I just want to buy it now, and you can't.
Yeah.
Can't buy it now.
So the shotgun went on for a while, but the Beretta was one I found. Limited edition Beretta M9 that was manufactured in 1998, has all of the government markings the way it should, has a few of the commercial markings too, so it's this weird gun. But I found it by just searching Beretta M92FS, and I was on like the 18th page of Beretta, and there's this one that was like Beretta 92 with OD green box. And when I saw that title, I was like, let me click on this listing, and I looked at the listing and I was like, oh my God, bid now. And I watched that auction for 2 weeks. I was the only person to bid on it, and I got the gun for an absolute steal. So if you're looking for guns online, sometimes think outside the box.
Fair enough. Think outside the green box.
Don't put in like exactly what you're searching for. Look for ways that may be misspelled or misidentified, or pick something that's comparable, and you may find that gun buried deep down in the pages and the listings for a deal. Now, if you're looking for the latest and greatest, I'll say like, if you're looking for like an older Smith & Wesson, a Smith & Wesson model 10-1, just look for a model 10 and then just go through. And it takes a little bit of legwork, a little bit of detective work to go through the listings until you find that gun. And you may surprise yourself what you find in the search results every now and again. Same thing with guns.com. I know you're looking for an Ithaca 1911. I'm still on the hunt for a National Postal Meter M1 carbine. So I'm always thinking outside the box and how someone would mislabel them and looking for that listing.
I'm pretty positive once we're done with this, I'm just going to hop on Gunbroker and search old 1911. Someone's going to be like, yeah, I got this old 1911, $100.
And you'll probably find a cool one. But that's the method I've been using to find cool guns on Gunbroker. Don't look for the obvious search result, but just go to page 10 on relevant and then go through it. What are some guns you're looking for, Tim?
I think the big ticket item right now is going to be the Ithaca 1911 and the Remington Rand, like we've discussed again multiple times. I'll do some digging. I think the CMP is going to be my place for that. There's some sentimental value to a gun like that, being from upstate New York, those guns both being made in that area. That means a lot to me. It's something I really want, and I'm willing to pay more for it. As far as just, I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to what I want. I think sometimes things just kind of fall in your lap. You see that email blast from your favorite online retailer, and that's a good deal. I should probably buy it. Or maybe your buddy got a speeding ticket and has to pay that $500 for doing 20 over, and he's like, hey man, I got to sell this gun, and we'll transfer it through the gun shop so you can get a deal on it. Stuff like that. This 9 times out of 10 when I'm picking stuff up.
I've always had this long list of guns that I look for, and even on Arms List, Gunbroker, not so much on guns.com because I don't know if they have this feature, but I have saved searches that when I log on, I immediately go through them. One of them was like Remington QU, QU camo. So they made a Model 7 Remington for a long time that QU camo, they did a stock in it, and it's like this 16-inch barreled feather, lightweight barrel, threaded, suppressor ready. It's this really cool Model 7. And it took me like 4 years to find one of those. And every couple weeks I'd get on Gunbroker, I'd go through my saved searches, and then I would see it pop up. And that's how the tracker happened. The M9 was exactly the same way. I've been looking for a really early military style Beretta M9 for a long time. You can buy the new commercial ones, but they're not right. They don't look right or feel right when you really get down to them. So sometimes, guys, if you're out there looking for these guns, it takes time. What's the longest you've ever put into finding a gun, Tim?
I would say during COVID in my old retail gun shop days, I really had an itch for a 45-70 lever gun. And Gunbroker at a gun shop during the day is the most dangerous thing you will ever find. First off, you're already working at a gun shop. It's costing money. Second, Gunbroker and wants. It's horrible. Bidding wars. It's brutal. And then you end up winning multiples. My great friend Andrew and one of the guys that worked there was sitting on Gunbroker one day. We both wanted 45-70s. I didn't want to bite the bullet, so to speak, and spend the money on it and Guess what? Wouldn't you know? He ends up winning a Henry and a Marlin 4570 the same day. So it was something I wanted, but I wasn't actually getting myself. So he's like, hey, I can't buy both of these. My girlfriend's going to kill me. So that's fine. I'll just buy one off you. It's all good.
Yeah.
So it was the gun I was looking for, and I did not intend on purchasing right away. And I ended up with it anyways.
That's
Where's that gun now? I don't know.
What?
I sold it. I've got a bad habit of that.
And, Katy Perry, she's got a song, The Ones That Got Away. Should be the soundtrack. We should try and license that.
I don't think we have that much money.
No, and I don't, man, I've let a lot of guns go, and it's been fun recapturing some of them, like the single shot shotgun has been super cool. I've chased a lot of guns for a long time, especially now that I'm older. Guns that I let go early on in my gun collecting, years, that now I'm looking back for them, and there's some cool ones that I'm looking for. I think the one unicorn, and because it's so rare, would be a Ruger P93 DC. So the old metal Ruger frame guns, so it'd be the P89, the P90, P91 through 94. Super cool guns. But the P93 was a compact 9mm that they only made for like a year and a half. You cannot find one. You can find them in double action only, but not in the decocker model, which was a double action, single action. So I've been searching for one of those now for about 3 months and not found one yet. Found a lot of other cool guns looking for that one, but the Ruger KP series would be, I think, a really cool one, and I'll keep hunting for that one.
It's funny you mentioned that. The Ruger P94?
Yeah.
40 cal?
Yep.
I could,
P93 was 9mm.
Yeah. Well, I happen to know someone that has one of those, the 40 cal version for sale.
And it's a cool gun. I think those were super cool guns back in the day. The P95, polymer frame, there's a lot of cool guns like that. And, I hope maybe this podcast episode inspires some people out there to go look for, one of those rarer guns, or one of those guns that's not, the mainstream guns. I'm not going to say arguing with a person on the internet a couple days ago, but they're like, the FN this or that's the greatest gun. And I was like, man, the FNX9 was super cool. It's a double action, single action, polymer frame, striker fired gun, or, hammer fired gun. Short run, wasn't super popular for long, but I'm like, man, those guns were cool when they were out. It was just a cool gun.
I think that's a good point to bring up too. Keep in mind something that you have, you see value in, someone doesn't necessarily see value in. So maybe you're taking, and this is horrible, but it happens all the time. Maybe you're taking grandpa's shotgun in and you want to sell it to that gun shop. I want $500 for this. And they come back and say, well, we can only pay $2. Just bear in mind that it goes both ways. It's something I want. I'm going to value higher than something that someone else doesn't. That's the reality of it.
It's a true story. I think when people are either buying or selling anything, what we hold, important to us, or what we value more, is different. There are people that like collecting high-end 1911s. I want my Nighthawk. I would love to have one. But, my $300 T-Sauce is just as important to my collection, I think, as anyone. And there are guys that do, they love their Springfield XDs. Is it a bad pistol? No, it's a pretty cool pistol. Does it have a collector value, or does it have resale value like other guns? Probably not. But regardless of why you guys own it, I think to me it's cool. You can own your Nighthawk and put it in your shelf and look at it every day, or you could own your beat up Rock Island Armory that you take to the range every Saturday and put 200 to 300 rounds through. That's the important part of it. Just getting out, shooting the guns, enjoying the guns, for whatever your reason.
Totally agreed. I don't think there's going to be a right or wrong, and I guess that's what this podcast is all about. As long as you're being safe and you're enjoying yourself, and maybe you're out with friends doing it too, that's what matters. Buy what's going to make you happy. Sometimes if you overpay for something, as long as you're happy with it, in the end, it is what it is.
Yeah. Go to your friends, go to gun shows with your friends, look at guns on the tables, go to the shooting range. I can't argue that any of us, if we saw a water heater thrown out on our local public range, we're not all going to look at each other, nod a little bit, and be like, we're about to shoot this thing. Is it right? Maybe not. Don't be dumping water heaters at your local public range, but if one happens to find its way there, you're going to shoot at it. And that is, I think, the most important part, Tim. Just get guns, have fun. They can be fun. They can be something we collect. They can be something we shoot. And I think that's cool.
Totally agree. They could be something we regret purchasing and very quickly trade into a gun shop for something else too.
Oh no, bad financial decisions are a great part of this, definitely. We all have those, and, trauma bonding. Going back to SHOT Show, trauma bonding. Man, have you ever been ripped off by your local gun shop? Well, OK a Shooter and the Powderhorn Podcast is a place for you. Tim, as we wrap this episode up, what's next on your list to buy?
Going back to it, it's going to be one of those 1911s. Ithaca Remington Rand. It is top of the priority list. There are some other purchases in the works, in the pipeline, as we would say. I'll be snapping some pictures of those here soon. I don't have them yet, but
I've got a 3rd gen Smith & Wesson that I'm eyeballing on Gunbroker right now. And of course, the elusive M1 carbine. Always chasing the M1 carbine.
it exists somewhere. It's just how much do you want to pay?
It's not how much I want to pay. It's how much I have.
You got me there.
There you go.
Also, remember, don't put yourself in a bad financial position just to buy that gun. Feed the kids. I don't have kids.
Yeah,
so.
tax time, I know tax refunds are cool, but maybe, bank a little bit of it, put a little bit of it away for a rainy day.
Yeah. Today's episode of the Financial Podcast.
Yeah. Welcome to the Powderhorn Podcast, where we are not licensed financial advisors. Any advice here is for entertainment purposes. So thank you guys for listening to this episode. I hope that if you are going out to purchase your next firearm, whether it's at your local gun shop, whether it's online at your favorite retailer, or maybe the one that just spammed your inbox the most, that you find exactly what you're looking for. If you want to learn more about the podcast, visit okashooter.com or powderhornpodcast.com. New episodes drop bi-weekly, and you can follow us on Instagram to catch up with all of our latest shenanigans. Tim, sign us off as we head on back to the range.
Well, guys, if you want to see what's going on that day-to-day, like I said, OK Shooter, OK is Tim on Instagram. Check it out and do what makes you happy. Buy that gun. If you can sling the bucks out, just do it. It'll all come out in the wash.
That's it. Ending it on that note.